Hey guys, this is Heroic Flamingo and welcome to my Guild Wars 2 class guide for the Weaver. In this video I'm going to be looking at the Weaver's exclusive weapon and each of the individual weapon skills. I'll then be looking at the healing, utility and elite skills it can use. I'll then move on to how it overhauls the base mechanics for the Elementalist, and then I'll have a look at the traits within the elite specialization to see how you can make yourself even more powerful. So if you're interested in playing as a Weaver, or if you already are and you want to know more, sit tight and we'll get started right now. Okay, so before we go into the detail, I just want to give you a quick profession overview for the Weaver. So the Weaver is the second elite specialization for the Elementalist and is unlocked in the Path of Fire expansion. Weavers can attune to two different elements simultaneously, deftly cycling them from hand to hand and combining them to powerful effect. They favour swords in battle and channel the strength of the element using their stance skills. So you're able to wield the main hand sword, which is a cool new melee weapon for the Elementalist. You're also able to unlock a new set of skills called stance skills, and we'll be going into all of them. But the main thing is that you unlock the dual attack mechanic, which means that you can switch between elements and combine them together, creating whole new abilities based on the elements that combine. So fire and earth will make their own ability, and water and air will have a completely different ability depending on your weapon set. So there's a lot of new skills to go into and a lot of really cool stuff. So the first thing I want to have a look at are the weapon skills. Okay, so the first thing I want to have a look at is the new and exclusive weapon for the Weaver. So this is the main hand sword. So this is our first 3 abilities. But obviously because the Elementalist has 4 different attunements, there will actually be 12 new abilities to look at, 3 for each attunement. I'm not going to be looking at the dual attack skills in this part of the video. I'm going to do that in the profession mechanics bit part later in the video, and I'll do it for every single weapon, not just this one. So I'm just going to show you the 3 base abilities for each attunement for the sword. So let's start with the fire attunement. So I'm attuned just to fire, and my first ability is a chain skill, and this is fire strike, fire swipe and searing slash. So build elemental flames into your sword and strike your enemies. So this is going to damage enemies at melee range and hit up to 3 targets. Then heat your sword a second time and strike your enemies for increased damage. So this is going to do more damage, again melee range to up to 3 enemies. And then finally heat your sword a final time and use the full power of your flames to sear enemies and ignite them. Okay, so on the third hit we're going to do big damage as well as setting them on fire. Up to 3 enemies within melee range as well. So let's try this out then. Okay, it's low on health, but they all are. But let's try this out. So smash, smash, smash. That guy's dead. Smash, smash, and then a big one at the end there. So bang, bang, bang. That's really cool. Alright, so that's a nice chain ability there with a nice bit of burning on the end. So decent damage and condition damage as well. Our second skill is Flame Uprising, and this has an 8-second cooldown. So jump forward and deliver a fiery blast to the area. So this is going to jump towards a target from a range of 450, so sort of mid-range. It's going to do an initial amount of damage, and then it's going to blast in the area and do damage in a radius of 180. And set fire to the enemies as well, so it's going to do decent initial damage and then a bit of field damage afterwards. So we'll do it from about here, let's try it out. Boom, there you go. So it flips, does that, and then it has a 2-second field with a radius of 180, which is going to be damaging and burning all enemies in the area. So that's a pretty cool way there to flip into battle and do some damage as well as some AoE damage over time to enemies in the area. So our third one is Cauterizing Strike, and this has a 15-second cooldown. So stab your foe with full force, dealing bonus damage against burning enemies. So it's going to be a big stab which is going to hit up to 5 targets with short range in front of you. It's going to set them on fire, which is cool, but if they're already on fire it's going to do even more damage. So if you've already set them on fire with one of your other abilities, then you're going to be able to do extra damage. So you're going to want to use this once you've already set them on fire, which to be honest when you're in fire attunement it's going to be quite frequent anyway. But let's try this out normally anyway and see what it does. Boom. There you go, big stab, big burning damage, and that does hit a few enemies if they're really close to you or within melee range as well. So that's pretty awesome there for the fire attunement for the sword. Okay, so now we switch to the water attunement on the sword, and let's try this out. So our first ability is once again a chain ability, and it's Siege, Clapatis, and breaking wave. So the first one, imbue your blade with water, healing yourself at each target you strike. Second one, deliver a second strike that heals yourself for each target it hits. And then third one, strike your enemies and unleash a wave that heals allies. So it's going to do damage and healing, so it's a bit of both. So the first one, you're going to hit the enemy and you're going to heal yourself for each target you hit, and then you're going to heal yourself for each target it hits again, and then unleash a wave that heals allies. So the first two hits are going to do damage and heal yourself, and then the third one is going to damage enemies and heal allies in a radius of 240 around you. So it's got to be done from short range and hits 3 targets. Boom, boom, boom. Nice, so bang, bang, and then a big wave at the end. Nice, cool little animation there. But yeah, no, that's the first one. The second skill is Riptide, which has an 18-second cooldown. So use the element of water to propel yourself backwards and regenerate, leaving a healing area at your location. So you're going to damage some enemies, so there is going to be a bit of damage. You're going to flip backwards, evade for a second and 3/4, and then you're going to leave a healing area at the location for 4 seconds, which is going to affect up to 5 allied targets and give them regen. So that's cool. So let's try this out then. So if I line this up, well, there you go, a bit of damage there. Oh, okay, so the healing area does come with you actually, so if you jump back towards your allies, then they're going to be healed in that area. But it does travel with you, so anyone along the way is going to get a nice bit of healing and a little regen buff as well. So that's a nice one there to support your allies. And the final one is Aqua Siphon, which has a 15-second cooldown. So strike an enemy and draw water from them, causing them to deliver a healing burst to your allies. Okay, so we're going to hit the enemy, and basically it's going to help to we're just going to hit one enemy on short range, and then it's going to do a healing burst to our allies, up to 5 allied targets in a radius of 240. So let's try this out. So once again, a mixture of damage and healing. So there you go, boom, and then that's going to heal. That when it's healing, it bursts out of them there. So you draw the water out of them, it bursts out and does a nice heal for your allies. Okay, so now we're in air attunement on the sword, so let's see what we've got. So another chain skill here in our number 1. So charged strike, polaric slash, and cool lightning. So first of all, strike your foe with shocking force, so it's going to be melee range up to 3 targets, can do a bit of damage. And the second one is deliver a second strike, gaining swiftness. So once again, melee range can do a bit more damage than the first, and it's going to give you swiftness for a couple seconds. And the third one's going to deliver the final attack, calling lightning strikes onto enemies. So a bit of damage at first, and then a few different lightning strikes afterwards, hitting up to 3 targets in melee range. So it's still pretty close range, but let's try this out, see what this looks like. So bam, and then swiftness on the second one, and the third one, boom, there you go. So it's got a few delayed lightning strikes afterwards. So slash slash, boom. So we've got swiftness and we've got some lightning strikes there as well. So our second ability is Polaric Leap, which has got a 15-second cooldown. The shadow step to your target and deliver a dazing strike. Gain super speed if you interrupt an enemy. Okay, so we're going to shadow step to them from 600 range, so mid range we can do that. It's going to daze the enemy only for a quarter of a second, but it's going to give us, if we interrupt the enemy, so if they're using a skill and we interrupt them, then it's going to give us super speed as well. So, boom, there you go, so a really awesome shadow step there. Obviously they're not using ability, so we don't get the super speed, but you can see that, and then we evade, so we won't take any damage while we're shadow stepping to them. So it's a good way of moving around, avoiding some attacks as well, which is awesome. Our third one is Quantum Strike, and this has an 18-second cooldown. So strike your foe, charging them with static and causing lightning to strike repeatedly for a short period of time. So we're going to hit them with an initial hit from melee range, and then they're going to get a bunch of lightning strikes that hit them afterwards, which is going to do decent damage over time, and also inflicts some vulnerability as well, so they take more damage. So let's try this out. Bam, there you go, and then as you can see, yep, a bunch of strikes of lightning there, all putting vulnerability on the enemy there. 9 stacks, so that's really effective. So that's another cool one. So that's the air one for the sword. Okay, so now we've got the Earth attunement with the sword. So our number 1 is once again a chain ability, and it's Crystal Slash, Crystalline Strike, and Crystalline Sunder. So first of all, you're going to strike the opponent with a serrated blade, so it's melee range up to 3 targets, going to do a bit of damage and inflict bleeding on the enemy. And then with the second one, attack enemies with a second vicious attack, which is going to do more damage and more bleeding. And the third one is unleash a final crushing blow. So it's going to do more damage than the others, as well as bleeding and cripple. There's quite a few effects with this. So you're going to, the first one's going to be damage and bleeding, second one damage and bleeding, and the third one damage, bleeding, and cripple. All of it's up to 3 targets, and it's all got to be done from melee range. So let's try this out now. So, boom, boom, bam. There we go. So you can see we've got stacks of bleeding, as well as cripple on the enemy there, which we can stack up on them by utilising that. Nice one. So the second skill is Earthen Vortex, which has an 18-second cooldown. So burrow into the ground, then erupt with earth-shattering force. Okay, so we're going to go under the ground, then we're going to come out with a nice blast, and it's going to evade for 1 second while we're underground, and then it's going to hit up to 3 enemies within close range, and it's going to do damage, bleeding, and cripple. So let's see what this looks like. Boom, there you go. So you go under, straight back up, and a nice big damage there to anyone in the area, with bleeding and cripple as well as evading for a second, so that's pretty good to avoid a bit of damage. So the third and final skill is Rust Frenzy. This is a 15-second cooldown. So strike your enemies with deadly force. So this one's going to hit the enemy a bunch of times, doing a lot of damage. It's going to put a bunch of stacks of bleeding, and it's going to be up to 3 targets from melee range. So let's try this out. So let's try this out with someone with a bit more health. Bum, 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 bum. There you go. So you jump, you do a bunch of slashes there. Did decent damage, to be fair, as well as damage over time with the bleeding. So that's a really cool skill there. Okay, so that's all of the skills for the weapons, the new weapon, the sword. Like I said, I didn't show you the dual attack ones for the sword, but I'll go into that with the profession mechanics. But the next thing I want to have a look at are the healing skills. Okay, so the next thing I want to have a look at is the new healing skill for the Weaver. So this is our first look at one of the Weaver's new stance skills. So this is called Aquatic Stance. This is an ammo skill, so you have 2 counts, and the count recharge is 25 seconds. So striking a foe causes water to erupt from them, healing your nearby allies. So it's got an initial heal, as well as when you're in aquatic stance, which you will be for 5 seconds. So you're going to have initial heal, and then you're in aquatic stance for 5 seconds, and you're going to heal allies around you when you strike, basically. So whenever you hit an enemy, you're going to be healing allies. So it can hit up to 5 targets, 5 allies around you. It can happen every 1 second, and then obviously you can use this again as it's got 2 charges, but then you will have to wait the 25 seconds for the count to come back. So let's try this out then and see what it is when I hit enemies as well. So healing, initial healing, then look, healing allies, all of my hits, as you can see, every 1 second it's doing that, and it's pretty cool there. So as well as your initial heal, you're also going to be healing allies around you whenever you hit enemies. So if you're in a group situation, you've got quite a lot of enemies, you could use that to give yourself a bit of healing, and then obviously you're going to be doing a lot of damage to enemies, and as you're hitting them, you're going to be healing all their allies around you as well. So that's really cool. So that's the new healing skill. So the next thing I want to have a look at are the new utility skills for the Weaver. Alright, so the next thing I want to have a look at are the utility skills for the Weaver. So if we look here, we can see we've got 4 new stance skills across here. So we're going to try them all out. I'll look at the first 3 now, have a look at them, try them out, and then we'll look at the last one afterwards. Alright, so first up we've got Stone Resonance. So this is an ammo skill, so you've got 2 counts of it, and the count recharge is 50 seconds, so bear that in mind, that's 50 seconds. Enter an earthen state, gaining barrier periodically over the course of the stance. Okay, so you're going to be in this stance for 5 seconds. It's going to pulse 5 times, and it's going to give you barrier each of those times. So every 1 second it's going to pulse and give you barrier. So that's going to, barrier is basically a shield on top of your health, which will absorb the damage before you actually take any damage off your health. So that's pretty cool. So that's quite good for staying alive. let's try this out. It looks like it also gives you stability as well. Yeah, look, stability. So as you can see, if enemies attack, as you can see, it builds up as well. So, and then it goes away afterwards. So obviously you want to use it while you're in combat, so it absorbs the damage. But you know, that's pretty good there. That's going to absorb a good amount of damage and help keep you alive. As you can see, it's got a count recharge, so I can use it again. And then obviously you've got to wait for that 50-second cooldown, so that is quite a little while. You've got to wait for that. Next up, we've got Unravel, which is another stance skill, which is the same. You know, it's got 2 counts, whereas this count recharge is 25 seconds. It's for a period of time you forego your Weaver training, choosing to fully attune to elements instead. Gain boons based on your primary attunement and reduce all attunement cooldowns. So for 5 seconds, it changes things a little bit, so you no longer have the dual attack, so you won't be able to move between your elements and use your dual attacks. But considering it only lasts for 5 seconds, I wouldn't have thought that really matters that much. You're going to gain a boon based on your attunement, so whatever you're attuned to, at least the primary attunement. If you're in fire, it'll be might. If you're in water, it'll be vigor. In air, fury, and in earth, protection. And then reduce all attunement cooldowns at the end of it as well. So recharge reduction of 100%. So it's a pretty cool way of getting rid of the recharge on your attunements along here as well, if you're waiting on that, as well as giving yourself a buff. And maybe if you didn't want to use the dual attack skill, if you wanted to use just the base skills for that attunement, then you can do that as well. So let's just have a look. There you go. So you can see we've got Unravel on there. We've got Might buff because we're in fire attunement. We're already fully attuned, but if we weren't, we'd become fully attuned to that attunement, and then we can use it twice as well, with a 25-second count recharge. Okay, so the third one is Twist of Fate. So this has also got 2 counts, but it has a 75-second count recharge. So break stun, then spin and briefly evade attacks. Okay, so yeah, first of all it's going to break stun, which is cool. It's going to evade for a second as we spin. So we're going to break stun, evade for a second, and also it looks like it's going to give you super speed as well. So you can move around really quickly for a second and a half. So it's good for moving around. If you're being stunned and taking a lot of damage, you can use this because you're going to get out of that stun. You're also going to evade for a second, and you can be able to run really quick, so you can get away from the enemy a little bit, get some distance between you. So it's pretty cool evasive ability there. So let's see what this looks like. Boom, there you go. So it gives super speed, and obviously for that second there we'd be evading, as well as obviously breaking out of any stuns that we're in as well. So that's pretty cool. Alright, let's switch to the 4th one now. So this is our 4th and final utility skill for the Weaver. So this is Primordial Stance. So channel the prime elements at their core, dealing damage based on your current attunements. Fully attuning deals the same condition twice. Okay, so you're going to deal damage based on your current attunement. So you're going to do a bit of damage to start with, and then you're going to do burning damage if you're in fire stance, chilled if you're in water stance, vulnerability if you're in air stance, and bleeding if you're in earth stance. So as you can see, primordial stance lasts for 5 seconds, deal damage and inflict conditions based on your current attunements. It does say fully attuning deals the same condition twice. So if you're partially attuned to fire and water, say, you're going to be putting burning and chilled on the enemy, but if you're fully attuned to fire, you'll be doing double the amount of burning. So do bear that in mind. Hit up to 5 targets from a relatively small radius of 180 there. And like I said, you can use it twice, but the count recharge is 25 seconds. So let's have a look at this. There you go, you can see. Really cool there. Pumps 5 times, letting that out to all. So if I say, for example, if I go air stance and fire stance I've got at the moment, so if I use that again, you can see vulnerability and burning because I'm in both stances. Like I said, if I fully attune, it's just going to do double of that one condition for that particular one. Okay, so that is all of the utility skills for the Weaver. So next thing I want to have a look at is the new elite skill. Alright, so now I want to have a look at the new and exclusive elite skill for the Weaver. So this is an elite stance skill, and it's called Weave Self, and has a 90-second cooldown. So temporarily reduce the recharge time of attunements while gaining bonuses for attuning to new elements. Successfully attuning to all elements ends this stance and grants perfect weave. Alright, so let's dig into that. So you give yourself weave self for 20 seconds. And that means that you gather the elements to become the ultimate being. So as you go between different attunements, you're going to be getting different bonuses. When you go into fire attunement, you'll get plus 20% condition damage. When you go into water attunement, you'll get plus 20% boon duration and 20% healing increase to others. When you go into air attunement, you'll get extra 50% movement speed, and in earth, you'll get minus 20% incoming damage. So that's cool. As it is, and obviously what it says, it's going to reduce the recharge, so you'll be able to switch between the elements quicker as well, so you'll be able to go between them and get those buffs. But the really cool thing is once you've done all 4 elements, so as long as you do all 4 elements within that time frame, you're going to get perfect weave. And perfect weave lasts for 10 seconds, and it's 20% boon duration, 20% healing increase to others, 20% condition damage, minus 20% incoming damage, and 50% movement speed. So basically all the buffs you went through before, you'll get all of them on yourself for making the perfect weave. But it doesn't end there. Once you've attuned to all 4 elements, you'll also have a short time frame where you can use your second skill, as you can see just below it, called Tailored Victory. And this is release all of your woven elements and end your weave self stance, causing gravity itself to unravel around you. So it's going to do damage to enemies around you in a radius of 360, hitting up to 5 targets, and it's going to make them float for 2.5 seconds. Yeah, you heard that. It's going to make them float. So that's really awesome, and we're definitely going to try that out right now. Alright, so let's see how this goes then. So, if I press this, boom, there you go. I've got my self-weave. As I switch between them, you see quick cooldowns there. I'm gaining all of these boons. As soon as I get to there, we've got perfect weave, and we can now use Tailored Victory. Boom. Which literally damages and floats all the enemies around you. I mean, that's really cool there, and those animations were awesome. So you're going to be buffing yourself up massively using that, switching between the elements. Obviously you can stick some of your skills in there, you know, your weapon skills in there quickly in between. You don't have to just bash the buttons F1 to 4, so you go into fire skill quickly, smash out a couple of skills from that, go for it. You've got 20 seconds, so you should have enough time to go between all 4 of them, using a couple of skills, doing damage, giving yourself the bonuses, and then if you want to make the people float, then you've got to use that awesome skill at the end there, Tailored Victory. So yeah, that's really awesome. So that's a really cool new elite skill. So that's the new elite skill for the Weaver. So the next thing I want to have a look at are the unique profession mechanics. Alright, so now I want to talk about the unique profession mechanics for the Weaver. So we've already looked at the sword, which is the new weapon that we can use. That gives us quite a few new weapon skills to play with. A nice cool melee option for the Elementalist. We've been through as well the new stance skills that we've got along here. They're really cool. Ammo skills that give some really cool abilities there. The elite skill is particularly awesome. So that's really cool. But the main thing we want to have a look at is the ability to attune to 2 different elements at the same time, which is the main point of the Weaver. That's why it's called the Weaver, because you're weaving between the elements. And we're going to have a look at that right now. It can get a little bit confusing, and there's quite a lot of new skills to learn, so do bear with me. So basically, when you attune to an element, the last element you are attuned to will become your secondary element. So I'm fully attuned to fire at the moment, so all of these abilities are fire. So what I'll do, if I press F2 to attune to water, you see what that's done? That's now made water my primary attunement. So that means that the first 2 skills here are defined by my primary attunement, so water. But because my last attunement I was on was fire, that's now become my secondary attunement, and that defines my 4th and 5th abilities. The really cool thing is the 3rd ability. So this is the dual attack ability, and this is what's unique to the Weaver. So dual attack is an ability that mixes the 2 attunements together, so your primary and secondary. So in this case, water and fire gives us this cool new skill here. And to be honest, there's one for every single weapon as well, as well as every combination. So there's quite a few to go through, and I'm going to show those all to you now. But also, if you're in water attunement, so you're like this, if you press that again, then you fully attune to water as you normally would, and you've got all 5 water abilities. So you've still got that option if you want. So do bear that in mind. And then when I switch again, as you can see, that's then made that my primary, and then my secondary is now water. So what I'll do now is I've got the staff equipped, so I'll start with that, and I'll show you all of the dual attack abilities that we can use on the staff. So first of all, yeah, we've got the fire attunement with water as secondary. So fire and water mixed for the staff gives us pressure blast, which is a 15-second cooldown. Send out a vaporous projectile that heals allies it passes through. This projectile violently explodes if it hits the ground or strikes an enemy, healing allies and damaging foes in the area. So it's a targeted ability. It's going to send out vaporous projectile, it's going to heal allies, and it's going to violently explode, which is going to heal allies and damage enemies as well. So a bit of both. So it's ground target. So if I place it on this guy here, there you go. It's going to heal allies as it goes through, and when it hits them, it does damage to him, blinds them, as well as putting swiftness on allies and putting some damage on the enemy there as well, and healing allies in the area. So that's cool. So if I now switch to air, so now we've got fire and air. This gives us plasma blast, which is a 15-second cooldown. So launch a ball of plasma that explodes on impact at your foes. So similar again, it's going to shoot it out, it's ground targeted, it's going to explode on impact, it's going to damage up to 5 enemies in the radius and give barrier to allies as well, so that's cool. This one I aim, so I aim at this guy, boom, there you go, it gives you a bit of barrier to allies, does damage, inflicts vulnerability as well. So now we've got air and earth. So air and earth gives us pile driver, which has an 18-second cooldown. So after a short channel, launch a hyper fast boulder that decimates foes in its path. So we're going to shoot this out, it's going to do damage to enemies, it's going to daze targets for a couple of seconds, hit up to 5 enemies, it's also going to give barrier to allies as well. So let's try this out. So you've got to channel it first, but then it hits them, puts that vulnerability on them, dazes them for a couple of seconds, so it'll be a nice interrupt there if they're using a skill as well. So now earth and fire. This gives us pyroclastic blast. So this has a 15-second cooldown. So launch a molten rock that devastates an area. So this is going to be a ground targeted ability. It's going to do damage on impact as well as pulse damage, which is going to pulse 4 times every 1 second in a radius of 180. Hitting up to 5 enemies, doing a decent amount of damage, and inflicting burning as well. Let's place it on this guy's head. Nice. As you can see, big impact damage, but big damage over time as it pulses as well, because damage over time on the burning, but also the pulsing of it as well. So that's going to have a cool effect. Okay, so we want water and earth, so let me just wait for this to... There you go, water and earth. And this gives us Lahar, which has a 20-second cooldown. So create an area that cripples and damages enemies. So it's ground target ability again. It's going to cripple up to 5 enemies in the radius. And it's going to grant stability to allies. And it's going to last for 5 seconds. So damage as well, decent amount of damage I should think. So let's try this out. Nice, cripple, vulnerability, damage to all enemies in that area, so that's a pretty cool skill there as well. So last one, water and air, and this gives us monsoon, and this has a 20-second cooldown. So launch a hurricane in a direction, healing allies and damaging enemies. So we're going to launch this ground targeted ability, it's going to damage enemies, it's going to grant regen to allies, and it's going to chill enemies as well. It's going to hit 5 targets per pulse in a radius of 180, so let's try this out. Okay, so we're going to shoot this at them. So, boom. There you go, so you're going to hit all enemies along that path and all allies as well, giving them benefits as well, so that's a pretty cool one there. Okay, so now I've equipped the main hand sword, which is our exclusive weapon, and I want to show you the dual attack skills on this weapon. So I'm starting with fire and water attunements, and that gives us twin strike, which has a 12-second cooldown. So quickly strike enemies in front of you with the extreme nature of fire and water. So this needs to be done from close range, so melee range, and you're gonna hit enemies a couple of times, and you're gonna inflict chilled and burning. So chilled is the water, burning is the fire, so it's a mixture of both. So let's see this. Nice, you can see a couple of conditions there and doing a decent amount of damage over time. So So next up, let's have fire and air.
6 feet tall.
So Pyro Vortex. This is a 15-second cooldown. So strike enemies in an arc in front of you, creating burning vortexes on enemies you hit. So it's close range. You're going to hit enemies in front of you. You're going to set them on fire, as well as creating. So you're going to create burning vortexes on enemies you hit, which can set fire to them. It's going to pulse 8 times. It's going to last 2.5 seconds. It's got a radius of 90. So let's try this out. See what this looks like. Boom. There you go. So any enemies in that area are going to get that. Pulses a bunch of times. Does a lot of damage, to be fair. So if you've got quite a few enemies there, that's going to do a lot of damage to them. So that's a really cool skill. So I just want to sort of keep track of how I'm doing this. So fire and earth next. Lava skin. And this has an 18-second cooldown. So cover yourself in an increasing barrier while dealing damage to enemies. So we're going to put an initial barrier and then a per pulse. So every 1 second. For 5 seconds, it's going to pulse every 1 second to give you more barrier, and grant you stability, and it's also going to burn enemies around you. So let's try this out. Nice. It looks really cool. It sounds really cool. It does a cool effect, so that's really awesome, to be fair. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I've done fire and all of them, so I'm going to do water and air. Alright, so that gives us Shearing Edge, which has a 12-second cooldown. So form a frozen blade and spin it towards your enemy. So we're gonna damage enemies from 600 range. So this one's mid range. I'm just gonna chill the enemies. It's gonna hit up to 5 targets. Nice. So that shoots a swinging thing there. So it's gonna hit enemies along the way. It's gonna chill them. Anyone in that area is gonna get hit and get chilled put on them as well. Okay, so that's water and air. So now I want water and earth. So let's try this out. Water and earth. And this gives us Natural Frenzy, which has a 15-second cooldown. So unleash a volley of ice and earth at your enemies. So this is going to hit up to 8 times. It's going to shoot a volley at them. It's going to do a bunch of damage. It's going to inflict vulnerability. And it's going to inflict bleeding. It's going to hit 8 times from mid-range again. So let's try this out. Nice, so 8 hits on the enemy there, inflicts bleeding on them, bit of damage over time. You can do it from range as well, which is cool because it's generally a melee weapon, so that's pretty awesome. And finally, we're going to have earth and air, and that gives us Gale Strike, which has a 20-second cooldown. You strike your enemies, lifting them and creating cyclones at their locations. Okay, so this is going to hit enemies. This has to be done from relatively close range. Cyclones last for 1.5 seconds. 1 target per cyclone. So there's a couple of things there. Vulnerability and bleeding as well. So let's just see what this looks like in practice. Nice. Floating enemies. Vulnerability. Damage over time. Nice. Okay, so now we've equipped the main hand scepter. And we're going to have a look at the new dual attack skills for that. So I'm starting off again with fire and water. And this gives us Fiery Frost, which has a 15-second cooldown. Launch a fire and ice bolt while evading. So you're going to evade for 1 second. It can be done from long range, and you're going to shoot a fire and ice bolt, which can put burning and chilled on the enemy. So that's cool. Let's try this out. Nice. So it shoots 2 there, does good damage, puts fire and ice on them, and jumps back, evading as well. So let's try fire and air. So this gives us Plasma Beam, which has an 18-second cooldown. So fire a superheated jet of plasma at your foe. So 900 range, so pretty long range, hits up to 3 targets and hits 5 times. So let's try this out. Boom, boom, boom. Right, okay, that's good damage there, to be fair. And that is going to hit up to 3 targets in that area as well. So that could be a very effective skill. So let's do fire and earth next. Okay, so fire and earth gives us Fracturing Strike, which has a 12-second cooldown. Call a meteor from the sky that crashes to the ground, creating an eruption of magma. Alright, that sounds pretty awesome. So it's going to put vulnerability and burning on the enemy, do a decent amount of damage. And let's drop this down on the head now. It can be done from long range. Nice. That's pretty instant there, to be fair. As you can see, burning vulnerability. Good amount of damage there, with a bit of damage over time as well. So now let's do
6 feet tall.
Water and air next, just so I remember which ones I'm doing. So you've got Glacial Drift, and this has a 15-second cooldown. Whirl air and ice together, sending out a super cooled projectile that chills enemies it strikes. Okay, so long range, you're going to send out a projectile here. It's going to chill enemies. It's going to grant stability to yourself and do a decent amount of damage as well. So let's have a look. Nice, that's awesome. Big chunk damage there, as well as chilling them as well, so it slows them down. And that's really awesome. It can hit up to 5 targets as well, so that can be really effective on a group of enemies. Okay, so water and earth next. Okay, earth, yep. This gives us Stone Tide, which is a 15-second cooldown. So bleed your foe with ice and sharpened stones. So it's going to hit a bunch of times, up to 8 times, doing a decent amount of damage, as well as bleeding them, vulnerability, hitting up to 5 targets in a radius of 180, so it's ground target. It lasts for 2 seconds and can be done from long range. So let's try this out. Nice, that's really cool there. And obviously damage over time as well as a vulnerability, so take more damage from all other sources. Nice, and last one should be air and earth. Okay, so air and earth gives us Earthen Synergy, which gives us a 20-second cooldown. Smite your enemies with the earth and sky, dealing damage from below and then stunning from above. Alright, this sounds pretty cool. So this can do an initial amount of damage from below, and then secondary amount of damage. You're going to cool down some lightning on them, I think. It's going to stun them for a second and a half, which is awesome. Hitting up to 3 targets in a radius of 120 around the target, and you can do it from long range. Let's try it on someone with a bit of health, this guy. Well, there you go, the earth, and then, yeah, so the earth does the damage, and then you've got the lightning that comes down and stuns them. So that's a really cool animation there as well, I like that. Okay, so finally we've got the main hand dagger, which is our final main or 2-hand weapon that we've got these skills on. So I'm going to show them off to you now. So once again, starting off with fire and water, and that gives us Steam Surge, which has an 18-second cooldown. So slide to an area, blasting foes with steam while healing nearby allies. So we're going to slide towards the enemy. It can be done from mid-range. You evade for 3/4 of a second, and it's going to blast foes with steam, so it's going to damage foes, and it's going to heal nearby allies, so a bit of both. So let's try this out here, slide towards this guy. Nice, there you go. As you can see, you've got a nice healing area there at the end, as well as doing a bit of damage, so that's cool. Next up, you've got fire and air, which gives you Plasma Burst, which has a 15-second cooldown. So burn your foes with a Plasma Blast. Sounds pretty simple and pretty cool. So that one is a decent amount of damage, burns a target, hits up to 5 enemies in a radius of 240. So let's try this out. So that's a radius around you there, so do make sure you do that when you're near enemies. So that one's going to affect enemies in a radius of 240 around you. So do pay attention to that, which I didn't. Okay, so let's just show that out on this guy quickly. So well, there you go. So it's going to burn the enemy and all enemies around you in a 240 radius. So next up, I want fire and earth, and that's Ashen Blast. So blind your foes with burning ashes. Okay, sounds cool enough. So that's going to be hit up to 5 targets and a range, 300 range, so relatively close range. It's going to burn them and blind them and do damage. There you go, blindness, burning, damage. Nice skill there. So next up, we'll do water and air next. So air and water. And that gives us Katabatic Wind, which has an 18-second cooldown. Release a frigid wind that damages foes. So it's 240 radius around you. It's going to hit up to 5 targets. Does damage, chills the enemy, dazes the enemy, and gives you regen. Nice. So you can see that affects everyone around you, chilling them. Gives you regen as well, so it helps you stay alive. So that's cool. So next up, water and earth, which is Mudslide. So trip your foes with mud as you slide past them. This says 20-second cooldown. Okay, so you're going to slide past your enemies, tripping them up with mud. You're going to knock them down for 2 seconds. The mud lasts for 3 seconds, and it can be done from a 450 range. And you're going to evade while you're doing it as well. Nice. You see it knocks him down, leaves a nice trail of mud there. So you're going to knock down quite a few enemies in a row there if you've got them lined up. And then last but not least, we've got the air and earth attunements, and this gives you grinding stones, which has an 18-second cooldown. Shred foes with a storm of stones. Take reduced damage while the storm is active. Alright, so it's going to hit 6 times, doing a decent amount of damage. While it's active, you get 25% damage reduction on you. You also gain stability. You'll bleed the enemies as well, and hit up to 3 targets and last for 3 seconds. So that sounds pretty cool. So I think this is enemies around you, so boom, there you go. So you can move with that, spreading that effect around as well, which is really awesome. Alright, so that is all of the dual attack skills and pretty much covers everything for the professional mechanics. So there's a lot of skills to go through, so I hope you kept up with that. Obviously it'll take you a bit of time getting used to it, switching between the elements, knowing which skills it's going to give you, depends on your weapon and everything like that. So I do understand that, you know, it is a bit more complicated, and I've just shown you the basic skills, but hopefully you can have a look at this and see which ones you like the look of. So the next thing I want to have a look at is the elite specialization and the traits within it. Okay, so now I want to have a look at the elite specialization and have a look at the traits within it to see how you can make your Weaver even more powerful. So just by having the Weaver here as your third specialization on here, as it's an elite one, you get sword proficiency, which means that you can wield swords in your main hand, and obviously we've already been through that. And then your first passive is Weaver, which is your active attunement is now applied to your main hand, with the old attunement moving to your offhand. Attunement recharges are reduced. Gain access to dual attack and the stance utility types. So this is obviously all the stuff we've been through so far, and that's just by having that trait on there and unlocked, then you're going to have access to all of those new things we went through. So our first choice is Superior Elements, which is dual attack skills weaken enemies. Attacks against weakened foes have increased critical chance. So all of your dual attack skills are going to put weakness on the enemy, and then you're going to have a 15% critical chance increase against weakened foes. Next is Elemental Pursuit, which is gain super speed when inflicting inhibiting conditions on enemies. So whenever you use Immobilize, Chilled or Cripple on enemies, then you're going to get super speed. Master's Fortitude. Gain increased vitality when wielding a sword. Gain bonus vitality based on a portion of your power and condition damage. So if you've got a sword equipped as part of your build, so if you've got the sword weapon, then you're going to get increased vitality, and you're going to get extra vitality based on a portion of your power and condition damage as well. Next passive is Elemental Refreshment, which is gain barrier when using dual attack skills, which we probably saw when I looked at those dual attack skills. They all seem to give you barrier, and that's because we've got this passive on here. Next up, Weaver's Prowess. So gain increased condition damage and duration for a period of time after attuning to a different element. So whenever you move to a different element, then you're going to gain increased condition damage and duration for a period. Swift Revenge. So gain swiftness when using a dual attack. Deal extra damage to enemies while under the effects of swiftness or super speed. So once again, buffing the dual attack, whenever you use that, you're going to get swiftness, and you're going to do extra damage to enemies while under the effects of swiftness as well. That's a 10% damage increase. Next is Bolstered Elements. So gain barrier when activating a stance. Activate lesser stone resonance when struck while below the health threshold. So whenever you activate a stance, which is all those stance skills we looked at, that's going to give you barrier. And then also, if you're struck below the health threshold, so if you're struck below 50% health, you're going to do lesser stone resonance, which is enter an earthen state, gaining barrier periodically over the course of the stance. So that's just going to help you stay alive a little bit longer. Final passive is Elemental Polyphony. So gain attributes based on your current attunements. When dual attuned, gain both benefits. Okay, so if you're in fire attunement, you get extra power. Water attunement, you get extra healing power. Air, you get extra frosty. And earth, you get extra vitality, just by being in the attunement. And like I said, if you're in 2 attunements at once, you get both benefits. Elements of Rage. So gain a damage bonus for a period of time when attuned to a single element. Gain precision based on a percentage of your vitality. So first up, you're going to get a 10% damage increase for 8 seconds when attuned to a single element, so that's if you double click on a particular element, and you're also going to gain precision equal to 13% of your vitality, which is cool. Next one is Woven Stride. So gain swiftness when you are inflicted with inhibiting conditions. When gaining either super speed or swiftness, also gain regeneration. Swiftness has increased effectiveness. Okay, so gain swiftness when you're inflicted with conditions. So immobilize, cripple or shield. Whenever they get put on you, you actually get swiftness, which sort of negates it a bit, I guess. And also when you get swiftness put on you, you also gain regen as well, which is cool. Finally, Invigorating Strikes. So gain vigor when using a dual attack. Dodge rolling grants a barrier. So whenever you use one of your dual attack abilities, you're going to get vigor, which is going to increase your endurance regen. And then whenever you dodge roll, you're also going to get a bit of barrier as well, so that's cool. So that's all of the traits for the Weaver. So the next thing I want to do is I'm just going to do a quick demonstration for you, a combat demonstration. I'm going to throw together a quick Weaver build, and we'll have a look what it looks like when it all comes together. Okay, so I've thrown together a quick Weaver build here. I've got the main hand sword, obviously, which is the exclusive weapon, and I've paired that with the offhand dagger. I've got a nice selection here of all of these stance skills that we've looked at, just to show those off. And let's have a look now and see how we get on.
I see the pattern. I will try.
Okay, so I'm pretty sure that shows off most of the Weaver abilities there, and I think this video covered most of the stuff to do with the Weaver. So if you have any more questions, then just leave them in the comments below. If you want to watch a video on any of the other classes or elite specializations, then check out the playlist on my channel, as I've nearly done all of them now. And if you want to watch a video that shows off all of the classes and elite specs in one video, more condensed, then check that out, because I've got that as well. So thanks for watching, guys. Like and subscribe to be kept up to date, and I'll see you later.